Lady's blade was at the engineer's throat. "Any last words?" He smiled. A cold blade pressed against Mason's neck, and with unblinking poise, Lady Saris murmured, "Any last requests?" The edge was icy, sharp enough to slice thought from bone. Mason grinned, wild and fearless, his gaze flicking to her bottomless black eyes. He inhaled the electric tang of ozone and adrenaline, daring her with the tilt of his jaw. "Only that you don't slip," he replied, voice rough with defiance. Saris's lip curled, a whisper of amusement, or perhaps scorn. The cabin around them was dim and close, metal bulkheads trembling as the night wanderer tore through illegal space. The hum of the ship was their only witness, the kind of silence that pressed secrets between heartbeats. Before Saris could react, the void split open with a crack like the universe itself screaming. Crimson energy ignited the darkness. Mason's vision swam with burning after images, as outside the viewport, a Thalari war cruiser surged from hyperspace. Its hull stretched impossibly far, bristling with armaments, and alight with the crimson sigils of an empire that had razed 100 worlds. Shadows swept across the smuggler ship, blotting out the stars. Sirens wailed, shrill and desperate. The deck lurched beneath Mason's boots. Saris, blade still at his throat, staggered but did not falter. He gripped the railing, knuckles white, as the world convulsed around them. "Hold on!" someone bellowed down the corridor. A sickening shudder ran through the hull as lances of plasma punched through the decks. The lights flickered, scorched air rushed in, smelling of burned circuitry and fear. Mason barely kept his balance as bodies tumbled past, crews scrambling for weapons, for escape, for anything at all. Suddenly, gravity seemed to shift. A deep, bone-vibrating thrum pulsed through the metal, and Mason felt himself dragged inexorably forward. A magnetic snare. He'd heard tales, but never believed the Thalari had perfected it. The ship groaned as it was reeled in like prey on a line, the war cruiser's docking bay yawning wide to swallow them whole. The smuggler captain, a broad-shouldered woman with a scar down one cheek, burst in with blaster drawn. "To arms!" she cried, firing into the air. But it was too late. Thalari soldiers flooded the night wanderer. Tall, ash-skinned, faces set in masks of obsidian and discipline. Their armor gleamed, catching the flicker of emergency lights, and their eyes, black, cold, reflective, missed nothing. They moved with unity, their weapons humming with lethal promise. The captain lunged, swinging her blaster in a desperate arc. One soldier stepped forward and, with a single brutal blow, struck her down. She crumpled, unmoving. Silence fell, heavy as stone. "Move!" barked a soldier, grabbing Mason's shoulder with cold metal fingers. He didn't resist. He watched Saris, who had sheathed her blade and now walked like a queen among beggars, untouched by chaos. Survivors, half a dozen, bloody and bewildered, were hustled through humming corridors, past glowing script that Mason couldn't decipher. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and foreign incense. At last, they were herded into a chamber that was both command center and throne room. Massive windows arched overhead, revealing a canvas of swirling nebulae and a scattering of faraway stars. Obsidian pillars rose to frame a dais where Lady Saris waited. Statuesque, her alabaster skin radiant in the starlight, midnight robes pooling around her feet, hair a shifting shadow halo. She surveyed the prisoners with a gaze that made Mason feel skinned. Her eyes, vast and luminous, lingered on him with unsettling curiosity. Saris descended the steps with a predatory grace, footsteps soundless on the etched metal floor. Her presence was a storm contained, danger wrapped in elegance. She stopped before Mason, studying him as if he were some rare specimen. "A human," she said at last, her voice cool, echoing through the vaulted space. "Not the usual catch." Murmurs stirred among the soldiers, but Saris lifted her hand and the noise died. She nodded at her guards. "Take the others to processing," she commanded. This one stays. A tall soldier stepped forward, weapon raised. Lady, Saris didn't bother to look at him. With a flick of her slender hand, she dismissed his protest. This one is mine. Take him to my suite. Clean him up. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but obeyed. Mason's wrists were bound in a ring of light, and he was led away, heart hammering. He caught Saris's gaze as he left, her eyes unreadable but intent. They marched him through labyrinthine halls, the floor thrumming beneath his feet. At last, they reached a set of carved doors that slid aside, revealing quarters more luxurious than anything Mason had ever seen. Silken drapes hung over crystalline windows, bathing the room in a violet glow. Alien fragrances lingered in the air. Spice, smoke, something sweet and undefinable. The walls shimmered with etched constellations, stories written in light. His rags were stripped away. Attendants, silent and efficient, bathed him in a mist that clung to his skin, washing away blood and grime. Fresh clothes, cut in an alien fashion, were left for him, a long tunic and fitted trousers of some dark, supple fabric. Left alone at last, Mason paced the room, inspecting every detail. He tested the door, sealed tight, the windows, armored and cold to the touch, the furniture, curved, unfamiliar, but inviting. He gazed out into the galaxy, watching the swirl of distant stars, the whirls of cosmic dust. His cell was a gilded prison, beautiful and inescapable. Time passed. Mason refused to yield to boredom or despair. He studied the devices in the room, holographic consoles, strange books, a crystal that sang softly when touched. He worked out, testing his limits, keeping his body ready. Days passed. No one came, no food, only nutrient vapors released at intervals. The silence was oppressive, but Mason endured. On the 5th day, the door hissed open. A Thalari male entered, towering and broad, his armor etched with the sigils of command. His skin was the color of volcanic ash, his eyes cold and contemptuous. Draven, Mason guessed, from the way the others had spoken. The lady keeps strange company, Draven said, circling Mason with predatory intent. She should have had you dissected, human. There are better uses for your kind than as pets. Mason met his gaze, refusing to back down. Then why don't you do it? Draven sneered, leaning close. Because she forbids it, for now. But remember, human, you're alive only by her whim. Displease her, and you'll beg for death. He turned on his heel and stalked out, the door sealing behind him with a hiss. Not long after, Saris arrived. The doors opened without sound, and she entered, her presence filling the room like a chill wind. In her hand, she carried a ceremonial blade, its edge catching the starlight. She approached Mason, eyes unreadable, the blade lifted to graze his throat. The metal was as cold as before, a perfect mirror of their first encounter. Any last requests, human? She repeated, voice a whisper against his skin. Mason laughed, undeterred. I find the irony delightful, he replied, the smile never leaving his lips. She withdrew the blade, her hand trembling ever so slightly. For the first time, she seemed unsettled by his composure. Thus began a new contest, one of minds and will. Saris's visits grew more frequent. At first, she came with soldiers and questions, her tone as sharp as the ceremonial blade she favored. She interrogated Mason beneath the sweep of violet starlight, her gaze never wavering. Explain your world's principle of democracy, she commanded one afternoon, arms folded, eyes dark and watchful. How do you prevent chaos without a singular will? Mason lounged on the edge of the low couch, the alien fabric molding to his body. We don't always prevent chaos, he said, voice edged with humor. Sometimes we manage it, sometimes we drown in it, but we trust that a chorus of voices will find a better path than a single one. She considered this, lips pressed in a thin line. And yet, Your species wars among itself. Thalari unity is simpler. Unity or obedience? Mason challenged, arching a brow. The air crackled between them, but Saris did not withdraw. Instead, her questions became more intricate, touching on human art, philosophy, even the mundane. She pressed for details of music, of color, of childhood games played under a blue sky. In return, Mason demanded to know about Thalari rituals, their legendary architects, the secret meanings of the tattoos curling across her wrist. As the days unfurled, their dialogue shifted. The icy formality thawed, replaced by a wary respect. Mason noticed the way her gaze softened when she listened, the way her lips twitched at his dry wit. Saris, for her part, found herself drawn to the cadence of his voice, the strange warmth of his laughter. He watched the subtle shifts in her posture, learning to read tension and release, curiosity and caution. One evening, the quiet in her suite was broken by a low, frustrated growl. Saris stood before the navigation array, its projection flickering erratically. She snapped at her engineers. The power grid is not stabilizing. If the harmonics fail again... Mason, perched near the window, studied the glowing display. He rose and approached, cautious but undaunted. It's not the grid. It's a misalignment in the second harmonic coil. The feedback's disrupting your phase anchors, not the core power. Saris stilled, her glare cool and assessing. You presume to correct my engineers? Not presume. Diagnose. He knelt, fingers dancing over the controls. If you recalibrate the anchors here, he indicated a cluster of sigils, and reset the harmonic phase, it'll hold. Her chief engineer scowled, but Saris nodded. Show me. He walked her through it, hands steady, explaining as he worked. The array's flicker stilled, stabilizing to a steady glow. Saris's eyes widened, admiration flickering behind her mask. You see what others do not, she murmured. Mason grinned, brushing imaginary dust from his fingers. Sometimes it's the outsider who spots the cracks, lady. From that night, something shifted. Their conversation strayed beyond the boundaries of prisoner and captor. Saris found herself waiting for his laughter, listening for the subtle inflections that betrayed sincerity or sarcasm. Mason watched her hands as she spoke, the way her slender fingers traced patterns in the air or curled possessively around a cup. The air between them grew taut, charged with an unspoken energy. She caught herself studying the lines of his jaw, the curve of his mouth. He learned the rhythm of her stride, the tilt of her head when she was lost in thought. After a grueling council, Saris returned to her suite, shoulders tight with exhaustion. Mason was there, crouched by the navigation array, running diagnostics. He glanced up as she entered. Long session? He asked quietly. She sighed, eyes haunted. The council intends to erase Outpost Lyra. Its productivity lags. Its people are inefficient. They say it must be done for the strength of the whole. Mason straightened, meeting her gaze. Erasing the weak doesn't strengthen the whole, lady. It just hides the cracks. You can patch a hull with scrap, but if you never fix the fracture, it'll fail when you need it most. She stared at him, the words slicing through her practiced detachment. For a moment, the weight of her heritage and command wavered. You speak as if you've lost something that mattered, she whispered. Many times, Mason replied. But I've also rebuilt. Sometimes what's weakest becomes what saves you. She sat beside him, silent, her mind turning over his words long after he'd fallen quiet. That night, sleep eluded her. Shadows danced across her ceiling, memories stirring in the corners of her mind. She dreamed of fire and loss, of orders given and lives erased, of voices crying out in the dark. When she woke, her composure shattered, breath ragged. In the silence, she found Mason by the window, watching the stars swirl beyond the crystalline pane. He did not speak as she approached, But when she sat beside him, their shoulders nearly touching, his presence was an anchor. Together, they watched the cosmos turn until the tremor in her chest eased. All the while, Mason moved with subtle intent. He remembered the mission that had landed him in Thalari Chains, the Lattice Core, a prototype human jump drive, lost years ago and whispered about in the underworld. To his astonishment, he found it here, displayed as a curiosity in Ceres's private suite, suspended in a field of light, its crystalline heart pulsing softly. He knew he needed access, needed her trust to even approach it. He began altering their environment in small, almost imperceptible ways. When the attendants changed the room's fragrances, Mason requested something closer to lavender, a human scent, unfamiliar to Ceres but soothing. He persuaded the kitchen to introduce flavors sweet and spicy, blending Thalari delicacies with human comfort foods. He moved the seating so it invited conversation, not interrogation, and left small tokens, a polished stone, a folded paper bird, where she might find them. Ceres noticed, though she said nothing. She found herself lingering in her chambers, breathing in the new scents, savoring the unexpected flavors. She watched Mason as he rearranged the pillows, as he laughed at her unfamiliarity with a human game played with colored stones. One evening, she lingered by the lattice core, its light painting her face in blue and gold. She traced its surface with reverent fingers, lost in thought. Mason joined her, his steps quiet. He stopped beside her, close enough to sense the warmth of her skin. "What is this truly?" she asked, eyes never leaving the core. He hesitated, then answered honestly. "A piece of my world. It was meant to change everything for us. Now it's just art." She turned to him, her expression vulnerable. Mason gently took her wrist, the contact lingering. In Thalari culture, he knew, such a gesture spoke of trust, of an invitation to deeper intimacy. "Where I'm from, value isn't always about dominance," he whispered, voice low. "Sometimes it's about connection, about what we share, not what we conquer." He guided her hand to the lattice core, pressing her palm against the pulsing light. The energy thrummed through their joined hands, a living heartbeat. Ceres's breath caught. Mason leaned in, and their lips met. A tentative brush, then a deeper, braver kiss. For a heartbeat, she froze, caught between habit and yearning. Then she yielded, her arms slipping around his shoulders. Their secret affair burned like a star in the cold reaches of space. In stolen moments behind closed doors, they explored each other's hearts and bodies, their union a riot of sensation and discovery. Mason's tenderness unraveled Ceres's careful composure, revealing depths she had never dared to show. In his arms, she found strength in vulnerability, the joy of trust, and the unfamiliar delight of laughter shared in darkness. And as they lay together, entwined beneath the starlit canopy, Ceres knew that what she had found in Mason was as transformative and as dangerous as any weapon or secret in her empire. Draven, sensing Ceres's change, grew suspicious. In the weeks since Mason's arrival, Draven had watched the lady's routines dissolve into something new and unpredictable. She smiled more often, retreated to her suite for hours, and consulted no one about her choices. Draven's pride could tolerate neither her secrecy nor her sudden leniency toward the human. His distrust festered, driving him to the shadows. He sought out Sira, Ceres's youngest attendant. Clever, quiet, always eager to please. Draven's voice was low as he pressed a heavy coin into her palm. "What does the lady do with her prisoner?" he whispered. Sira hesitated, eyes darting toward the sealed door. "He is no longer a prisoner, Commander," she breathed. "He dines at her table, reads her books. She allows him to touch the artifact." Draven's expression darkened. "The lattice core?" She nodded. "He studies it for hours. She does not object." That was all Draven needed. Dismissing Sierra with a glare, he stalked through the corridors, boots echoing. His mind raced. Mason's access, Saris's protection, the core. He called up security logs, pored over surveillance, and soon pieced together the truth. The artifact in Saris's suite was no simple trophy. It was a Terran prototype, a lattice core, long rumored to possess jump technology that could tip the balance of power. Mason was no wandering smuggler, but an undercover operative, his presence here a calculated risk. Fury surged through Draven, cold and righteous. This was treason. He made his way to the highest spire of the warcruiser, where the Archon held court. Archon Valen, Saris's father, was a man of iron tradition. His hair, white as moonlight, cascaded down his back, and his eyes, cold as polished stone, missed nothing. Draven knelt, head bowed. Archon, forgive my intrusion. I bring grave news regarding Lady Saris and the human. Valen regarded him with silent command. Speak. Lady Saris harbors a Terran operative. The lattice core in her chambers is not a relic, but a weapon. The human is no common prisoner. He is a spy. I have evidence of his tampering and of her complicity. Valen's lips thinned. Show me. Draven produced the stolen surveillance, the attendant's confession, the logs of Mason's unguarded visits to the core. The Archon watched, face impassive, then nodded once. Prepare the decrees, Valen ordered. The human is to be executed at dawn. Saris will answer for her treason. Draven bowed deeply. At once, my Archon. The next morning, the alarm in Saris's suite was no echo of battle. It was betrayal, sharp and shrill. Mason was reading near the crystalline window, while Saris paced, her dark hair unbound, tension thrumming in the air. The doors slammed open. Draven entered, flanked by 6 armed guards, the Archon's decree held high. By order of the Archon, Draven proclaimed, the human spy is to die. You, Lady Saris, are charged with treason. Saris moved without hesitation, stepping between Mason and the guards, blade flashing from her sleeve. He is under my protection, she declared, voice as cold as the void. You will not harm him. Draven's eyes narrowed. Saris, this is madness. Stand aside and submit to the Archon's will. I will not, she answered, not while your motives remain hidden. The guards hesitated, uncertain. Saris's authority still held weight in their eyes. Draven pressed on, voice oily. You defy your blood, your people, for a Terran. Yield, or face the consequences. Mason stepped forward, voice steady. Let her speak, Draven, unless you fear what might come to light. Saris's gaze met Mason's. 1,000 questions burned between them, but trust overrode doubt. Tell me the core's secrets, she commanded, her blade never wavering. Mason nodded, voice low. It's more than a jump drive. The lattice core records everything, audio, visual, even encrypted communications. If Draven has conspired with smugglers or plotted against you, the core has seen it. Draven's composure cracked. Lies. Prove it, Saris challenged. Activate the core. Mason moved to the pedestal, fingers gliding over the alien interface. The core pulsed, beams of light unfurling into a cascade of images and voices. Holograms flickered. Draven, meeting with off-world smugglers, accepting bribes, discussing the removal of Saris from power. His words were clear, his face unmistakable. The guards recoiled, lowering their weapons in shock. Saris's voice rang out. You have betrayed the Archon, Draven. By Thalari law, I challenge you to a duel of honor. Draven's face twisted in fury and fear. So be it. The guards formed a ring. Draven drew his blade, larger and heavier than Saris's, forged for brute strength. Saris circled him, her steps light and precise, blade glinting. The duel began. Draven lunged with savage force, driving Saris back. She parried, countered, dancing away from his reach. Mason watched, heart pounding, as steel sang against steel. Draven fought like a storm, relentless, brutal, fueled by desperation. Ceres answered with elegance and speed, exploiting every opening, her movements a deadly dance. A savage blow from Draven knocked Ceres to one knee. He advanced, blade raised. She rolled aside, striking his arm, drawing blood. Draven roared, swinging wildly, but Ceres slid under his guard, slashing his leg. He staggered, rage blinding him. "Yield!" he snarled. Ceres met his gaze, unwavering. "Never to you." Draven charged, but Ceres turned his momentum against him. In a final, fluid motion, she disarmed him, sending his blade skittering across the floor. She pressed her blade to his throat, their faces inches apart. Draven froze, breath ragged, defeat etched in every line. Ceres's voice was soft, but carried through the silent chamber. "Your life belongs to the Archon now. May he judge your fate with the justice you denied others." She stepped back, allowing the guards to seize Draven. He glared at her with hate and humiliation, but did not resist. Later that day, in the throne room, Archon Valen faced the consequences of truth. His pride was wounded, but he could not ignore the evidence. He stripped Draven of rank and title before the assembled council, his voice ringing with solemnity. "Draven, your ambition has brought shame to this house. Ceres, you remain my heir. May your judgment temper the future of our people." Mason stood at Ceres's side, free at last. He bowed to the Archon. "The lattice core holds more than proof of treachery. Its secrets can open new paths for both our worlds, if we stand as allies, not enemies." Valen considered, then extended his hand. "So be it. Let the past die. We look to the stars together." That night, serenity returned to Ceres's chambers. The city's domes glowed below, a river of starlight winding through the darkness. On the balcony, Mason leaned against the rail, breathing the cool air. Ceres slipped behind him, her arms winding around his waist, her hands settling at his throat. No blade, only love. He laughed, a deep, unguarded sound, echoing through the night. Ceres pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "Our worlds will never be the same," she whispered. He turned in her arms, pulling her close. "Nor will we." Their love, once forbidden, would reshape two worlds, born of trust, sealed in fire, and tempered by the courage to defy fate itself. 2 Earth years later, Unity Spire floated at the edge of the Perseus Veil, a marvel of Terran Thalari design, suspended between the black and the brilliance. Its hull was a living thing. Thalari crystal lattices wove through Terran alloy, shimmering with every pulse of the singularity that powered it. Defensive turrets lined the outer rim, silent and deadly, while radiant banners of entwined hands and stars fluttered from the highest pylons, a symbol of a new alliance, forged from conflict and sealed by trust. Inside, the strategy chamber vibrated with tension. Light spilled from the holomap, casting the faces of admirals and envoys in shifting hues of blue and gold. Terran and Thalari officers stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the swirling projection of the nebula rift, a lawless maze at the very edge of known space. Mason, now Terran envoy, stood at the center, one hand resting on the console. His dark hair was streaked with silver now, but his eyes burned with the same fearless spark that had first drawn Ceres. He analyzed patterns of pirate activity, his voice steady and clear. "Their pattern is obvious," Mason said, tapping a cluster of crimson markers. "Each raid follows a decoy, here, here, and here. They're drawing us into the open, but the real prize is the resonance depot at the rift's edge. If we strike from concealment, use a resonance array and a lattice microjump, we can cut them off before they scatter. Precision over force." A ripple of murmurs swept the chamber. An old guard Thalari admiral, his scars gleaming, scoffed. "Human tricks. The fleet must show its strength." Saris stood at Mason's side, clad in the deep navy of Admiralty, the sigil of entwined hands and stars emblazoned at her collar. Her hair was swept back, revealing the fierce lines of her face, the wisdom in her eyes. She fixed the dissenters with a look that brooked no argument. "Victory with minimal loss," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the grumbling. "A lesson my human partner has taught us. If we wish to hold this alliance, we must learn to value every life." She used the word partner deliberately, letting it echo in the air. Mason caught her eye, a flicker of warmth passing between them. In the silence that followed, the old guard officers fell quiet. The plan was adopted, the details finalized in a flurry of orders and acknowledgments. As the chamber emptied, Mason lingered, his gaze lingering on Saris's profile. Every line of her, from the set of her shoulders to the steady confidence in her stance. When the last officer had gone, Mason crossed the room to her, his hands finding her armored shoulders. "Partner," he teased, lowering his voice until it was just for her. She leaned back into him, closing her eyes for a moment as his breath stirred her hair. "Would you prefer consort, envoy, or accomplice?" He grinned, pressing a kiss to the bare skin above her collar. "I'll take all of the above, as long as it means you're beside me." Sarah smiled, her trust absolute. "Then stay beside me. Here, and everywhere." Their lives were a careful balance, a dance at the edge of duty and desire. On the bridge, their voices commanded fleets. In the quiet of their quarters, they shed their titles and became simply Saris and Mason. He taught her chess, and she taught him blade meditation, silent, graceful motions that calmed the spirit and honed the body. She took to chess with the same discipline she brought to battle, surprising Mason with her cunning and patience. "Why does the queen move as she wishes?" she asked once, studying the black and white board. "Because she's the most powerful piece," Mason replied, nudging a pawn forward. Saris arched a brow. "A lesson your people learned from mine, perhaps." "Or perhaps we both learned it from you," Mason said, laughter in his voice. In their private moments, Mason played Terran music, rich with longing and hope, and painted wild abstractions on the glass wall with pigment and light. Saris watched, fascinated by the emotions that danced across his face as he lost himself in creation. She, in turn, let him trace the inked sigils on her skin, telling him the stories of her lineage and the battles that had shaped her world. Their love deepened, each day revealing new strengths and new vulnerabilities. Mason revered her power, the way she held herself with pride and loyalty. Saris marveled at his gentleness, the way he listened, how he could make her laugh even in the midst of tension. They shared everything: fears, hopes, memories, and dreams. Their greatest project was the colony on Aurora, a blue-green world orbiting a gentle sun, chosen as the first true joint venture of Terran and Thalari kind. There, crystal towers rose beside steel and glass domes, fields of alien grain rippled beside Terran orchards. Children played in the shadow of both banners, speaking a new hybrid tongue. On the eve of Aurora's founding, Saris and Mason walked together through the emerald hills that overlooked the city. The sunset painted the sky in violet and gold, and the new city shimmered below, neither wholly Thalari nor Terran, but something new, alive with hope. "It's working," Mason murmured, his arm around Saris's waist. He breathed in the scent of wind and alien flowers, his heart full. "When I first landed on your ship, I thought your people would conquer, mine would analyze forever. I never imagined this." Saris looked out over the hills, her face softened by pride. "We are learning from each other. My people have discovered patience, and yours have learned to act with courage. We make a good team, Mason." He laughed, drawing her closer. "A team of firsts. Sometimes I wonder what legacy we're leaving behind." She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. For Thalari, legacy is honor and lineage, names carved in crystal, tales sung by our descendants. For you, it is the work you leave, the lives you touch. Mason nodded. Maybe it's both. I want to build something that lasts. Something that will still be here, long after we're gone. She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. Everything we have done is a first. Every choice we made opened a new path for both our worlds. He smiled, hope shining in his eyes. I'm not afraid of firsts. Not with you. Saris drew him close, her lips finding his in a kiss that was promise and pledge, joy and trust. As the stars brightened above Aurora, they stood together, leaders and lovers, knowing that their future, like their alliance, would be written with courage, compassion, and the power of two worlds, united. Returning to Unity's Spire, they learned of a diplomatic summit, a test for the fragile alliance. The announcement echoed through the polished corridors as Mason and Sarah stepped from the shuttle, the faint hum of the Singularity Core beneath their feet. Officers saluted, eyes bright with hope and anxiety. News traveled quickly. Emissaries from both worlds, many hostile to the Union, were inbound, determined to judge the alliance and their personal bond on its merits. Mason's jaw tensed as he read the list of names. Traditionalists, from both sides, he said quietly. They'll look for any weakness, any excuse to unravel what we've built. Saris's gaze was calm, but her fingers curled into the folds of her uniform. Let them judge. I will not hide who we are. He turned the datapad in his hands, considering. If we host them here, on a warship, all they'll see are walls and weapons. Let them see Aurora. Show them the result. Show them the future. Saris nodded, approval flickering in her dark eyes. On Aurora, every field and street is a testament. Let them witness what unity can build. Within hours, invitations were transmitted. The summit would convene in Aurora's crystalline council hall, overlooking the new city that shone with the mingled lights of two peoples. Mason coordinated the Terran delegation, while Saris issued the formal summons to the Thalari lords and nobles. The air buzzed with anticipation, and a subtle current of dread. The delegates arrived days later, their ships streaking down through Aurora's pink-blue sky. Thalari nobles stepped out first, tall and proud in armor that shimmered with sigils of lineage and conquest. Lord Karos led them, a mountain of a man with eyes cold as obsidian and a sneer barely concealed beneath the surface. Terran dignitaries followed, Senator Hale at their fore, her tailored suit crisp and her handshake cool. Mason and Saris greeted them at the gates, side by side. Their unity was not lost on the guests. Whispers followed in their wake as they led the procession into the heart of the city. The tour began at the edge of the fields, where Thalari farmers guided Terran drones through rows of hybrid grain. The visitors watched as crystalline water channels, born of Thalari engineering, irrigated crops selected by Terran botanists. Old Karos eyed the process with disdain. Thalari hands wielding Terran machines, he grunted. Is this the future? Our ways diluted by foreign thought? Mason offered a patient smile. Or strengthened by shared innovation. These crops feed both our peoples, my lord. The group moved on, passing through bustling markets where children of both races darted between stalls, laughter bright and careless. A little girl with Thalari eyes and Terran curls ran past, clutching a carved toy. Her mother, a Terran, called after her in both tongues. Senator Hale watched, lips pursed. We fear your fleets will drag us into war, she said, low enough for only Mason and Saris to hear. The price of alliance is always paid in blood. Saris met her gaze, voice measured. And the price of division is paid in graves. Here, the future is being written by children who know neither fear nor hate. They visited the joint clinic where Terran medics and Thalari healers worked side by side. A doctor, a Terran with gentle hands, reset a Thalari boy's fractured wrist while a healer whispered soothing words. The boy's father, a scarred Thalari veteran, watched with wary pride. Skepticism simmered, never far from the surface. The council hall's open session crackled with tension as delegates took their seats, the city's skyline gleaming through the crystal windows. Arguments flared. Lord Karos rose, his voice booming. This alliance weakens our blood. The Thal'ari have never needed Terran mercy. We are conquerors, not collaborators. Senator Hale stood, her tone crisp. We did not cross the void to kneel before your fleets. Every Terran fears that partnership will mean subjugation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Mason stood to speak, but Saris touched his arm, rising in his stead. She moved to the center of the hall, eyes sweeping the assembly, commanding, serene. We gather on a world built by both our hands, she began, her voice calm and resonant. My people honor strength, tradition, endurance. Terrans value innovation, peace, and hope. I have seen the limits of both. She turned to Lord Karos. Strength without purpose is emptiness. The might of the Thalari is nothing if it builds only monuments to past glories. She faced Senator Hale. Peace without courage is stagnation. The wisdom of Terra falters if it cannot act in the face of injustice. She paused, her eyes shining with conviction. This human did not teach me weakness. He taught me true strength. The strength to build, to adapt, to create new meaning from what was once only conflict. I am not less Thalari for loving him, nor is he less Terran for standing with me. The hall fell silent, her words striking like a blade made of light. She gestured to the window, to the city below. This is not a human world or a Thalari world. This is the future, and the future will not be dictated by fear or pride. It will be written by those brave enough to love and build together. Pride and vision threaded her speech, leaving the old guard without retort. Even Lord Karos lowered his gaze, and Senator Hale's posture softened. As the sun set, the delegates gathered in small groups, watching children play and listening to the distant music of both worlds. Old boundaries faded, suspicion replaced by the first glimmers of understanding. That night, in the quiet of their private quarters above the city, Mason sat on the edge of the bed, boots still dusty from Aurora's fields. Saris crossed to him, her robe a shimmer of midnight blue. Without a word, she took his hand and placed it gently over her abdomen. He stared at her, uncertain. Then he felt it, a faint, fluttering spark of life beneath his palm. His breath caught. For a moment the universe stilled. Saris's voice was a whisper, trembling with joy. And we are making something new. Laughter, pure and full, unrestrained, bubbled from Mason, a sound of hope reborn. He wrapped his arms around Saris, holding her close as the world outside faded away, the promise of a future woven between their hearts. Aurora flourished, becoming the heart of a new age. The colony's glowing domes and crystalline towers rose along emerald hills, their lights shimmering in the twilight, a living testament to what Terran courage and Thalari vision could forge together. In the city's plazas, the laughter of children, some with silver hair and dark eyes, others with Terran curls, and the faint blue markings of Thalari lineage, echoed among market stalls and sculpted gardens. Aurora was no longer an experiment or a gamble. It was a beacon, its very existence proof that ancient rivalries could dissolve in the warmth of trust and shared purpose. The alliance, once fragile and eyed with suspicion, now thrived. Ambassadors walked Aurora's streets without guards. Engineers from both worlds debated harmonics and hyperlattice theory in sunlit cafes. The council hall, once the scene of tense negotiations, now rang with spirited discussions, laughter, and the music of two peoples learning to dream in harmony. Mason and Ceres's partnership set a precedent none had foreseen. Their union, once whispered about in scandalized corners, had become legend. It was a love born not in ease, but in adversity, a wild, stubborn thing that had survived betrayal, doubt, and war. They were the first to bridge the chasm between their worlds, but not the last. Their child, the first true hybrid, became the living symbol of unity, a bridge between past and future, blood and hope. The birth was quiet and intimate. Ceres, fierce and serene, gripped Mason's hand, her eyes bright with 1,000 emotions. The child, small, perfect, with skin like pale dusk and eyes luminous as midnight, was placed in their arms. Mason wept openly, unashamed, while Ceres pressed her lips to the newborn's brow. "She is everything we dreamed," Mason whispered, voice trembling. Ceres smiled, fierce pride in every line of her face. "She is the beginning of everything new." Word spread quickly. Crowds gathered in the plazas, mingling in celebration. Thalari children presented Mason with a carved crystal blossom, while Terran elders offered swaddling blankets and songs from old Earth. That night, bonfires were lit on the hills, and Aurora glowed brighter than ever. Years passed, and Unity's spire transformed from a symbol of alliance into the beating heart of it. The once imposing warship was now a hub of innovation, its halls thrumming with the energy of invention and ambition. Labs brimmed with hybrid technology, Terran logic woven through Thalari crystal, fields powered by singularity drives and irrigated by living circuits. The fleet, guided by Ceres's unwavering strength and Mason's restless ingenuity, grew into the guardians of peace and prosperity. Patrols kept the trade lanes open, pirates and raiders scattered before their united front. Terran and Thalari officers served side by side, their uniforms marked by entwined sigils. Once, Thalari drills had been relentless, their discipline absolute. Now, they blended with Terran adaptability, briefings punctuated by laughter, strategy sessions alive with debate. One afternoon, Mason strolled through a new settlement rising on Aurora's western plain. He paused beside a half-built dome, blueprints projected in the air, a young Thalari architect at his side. "The support lattice will fail if the crystals don't resonate at the same frequency," she insisted. Mason grinned. "That's what the human scaffolding is for. It flexes, absorbs the difference. Trust me." She raised an eyebrow, lips twitching in reluctant amusement. "You Terrans always say that." He winked. "And you Thalari always double-check." Later, as the sun set, he watched as teams from both worlds raised the spire, their shadows long and intertwined. The settlement took shape beneath their hands, each stone and circuit a quiet act of faith. At home, Mason and Ceres lived in a gentle chaos, a tapestry of contrast and harmony. Mason, ever the engineer, filled their home with half-finished projects and wild ideas. Models of starships and prototypes of energy fields littered his workroom. Their daughter, now a quick-witted child with Sirius's piercing eyes and Mason's infectious laugh, dashed between rooms, questioning everything, building her own inventions from scraps. Ceres led her people into a new future, her presence both fierce and nurturing. In the council, she still spoke with a warrior's conviction, but in private she was gentle, teaching her daughter the old Thalari songs, listening to Mason's stories of Earth, tending the garden that spilled wildflowers over their balcony. One night, as the city's lights faded into the hush of midnight, Mason found Ceres on the roof, their daughter asleep in her arms. She looked up at the alien sky, its constellations unfamiliar, yet now filled with meaning. He came to her, wrapping his arms around them both. "Do you remember," he murmured, "the first time you threatened me with a blade?" Ceres's laugh was low and rich. "You were insufferable and unbreakable." "I was terrified," he admitted, his voice soft with memory. "But you saw through me, even then." She leaned into him, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as two notes in a chord. I saw someone who would not yield, someone who could match me. He smiled, brushing his lips against her temple. You taught me how to fight for something bigger than myself, for a world that could be better. She touched his face, her fingers lingering. And you taught me that strength is not only in the blade, but in the hand that offers peace. Their daughter stirred, blinking up at them with eyes that shimmered in the starlight. Mason bent to kiss her forehead, and Sarah sang a lullaby that spoke of home and journeys, of battles fought and promises kept. As the years slipped by, the wounds of the past faded. The memory of that cold blade at Mason's throat, the laughter that had changed everything, the impossible choice between loyalty and love, all receded, replaced by the steady thrum of peace and the quiet wonder of new beginnings. What remained was a legacy, a world transformed, an alliance unbreakable, a love that defied every expectation. In their laughter, in their touch, in the promise of the child they would raise, the future of two civilizations was written, a testament to courage, wit, and a love that could change the stars. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.